Hello everyone. In this video, let us see if we can build the cloud by our own and what are the requirements to build the cloud, or if we are not able to build the cloud. Many of the enterprise or business are already have cloud infra setup. The basic requirement for the cloud is the compute, the network, and the storage. When you pool the compute, network, and the storage, you have already created some sort of the cloud infra. When you are able to pool these resources, the compute resource, the storage, and network, you have virtualized your environment. This makes a case for the cloud. But is it really a cloud what you have configured or what you have set up? Cloud characteristics are resource pooling. So when you pool these resources and the compute resource, this is one of the characteristics. But there is also another characteristics which is rapid elasticity. The orchestration of your pooled resources can be done by one or the other way, like using the management tools which is provided by the VMware or the Microsoft management tools. One more characteristics of the cloud is public access. Whenever you set up your data center and you configure all your infrastructure by pooling the resources, you are basically setting up for your private services. So you are not going to give the public access. Hence, the characteristics of the public access is not given. So there will be no public access. And there is also another characteristics which is called as metering. Whenever you create a resource like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, you will be charging back to the customer based on the resources what they have used. But when you pool the resources in your enterprise or the business and you start using some or the other tools to charge back to your business unit. So this means you are able to pool the resources and you are also able to do the orchestration part and you are able to do the metering part also. But what happens to the public access? Since this is only dedicated or isolated for your own purpose or for your own enterprise purpose, hence it will not be available for the public access. So even though you have built the cloud infrastructure for your enterprise, but it is not available for the public access. And one more thing is, after building your infrastructure for the cloud, what kind of services you are able to provide, whether you can provide infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. Most of the enterprise, when you build these kind of infrastructure by pooling the resources, at a minimum, you are able to create the infrastructure as a service. So you are able to create infrastructure as a service for your private. For the private. If you wanted to set up platform as a service or software as a service like services, you need to have additional tools like how Microsoft uses their service fabric concept. If I remember correctly, Microsoft had acquired a company which is called as Cloudin in the year 2015 or 2017. Cloudin was mostly focusing into customers' resource usage and billing part. Cloudin was acquired and then Microsoft integrated into Azure platform to track customer resource usage. Now we understood that we are able to build the cloud, but it will be a private cloud. To build a private cloud, we need to invest, and this investment is called as capital expenditure, which is nothing but capex. So we need to invest a lot of money into network, storage, and the compute part. And also we need to take care of this data center. So after going through all the services and the characteristics of the cloud, one thing which we noticed, which is very important, is virtualization. Without virtualization, there is no cloud. It is as simple as that. So you need to have virtualization for your compute, for the network, and for the storage in order to build a cloud. Whether it is a private cloud or public cloud, virtualization is the main or key factor to build the cloud. Okay, now we know that we will be able to build the cloud, but what is the underlying infrastructure which needs to be prepared to build the cloud? For Microsoft Azure, Microsoft uses Hyper-V as their virtualization platform. For Amazon, it is Citrix Zen, and there are other cloud services which they are using KVM as their virtualization platform. If I wanted to create a private cloud using Microsoft Hyper-V, I wanted to check what is the maximum number of nodes a particular cluster can support. For Microsoft Hyper-V cluster, you can have a maximum of 64 nodes or host. And in this cluster, you will be able to create 8,000 virtual machines. If you are going with VMware, VMware also has similar configuration what you can set up. VMware also supports 8,000 virtual machines per cluster, and each cluster will support 96 hosts. And also, if you wanted to see what is the maximum CPU which each host is going to support, each host can support 896 CPUs. And if you check for memory, each host can support 24 TB of memory. For Hyper-V, 512 maximum CPUs will be supported, which is logical CPUs, and each host can have 48 TB of memory. And for 2016 and 2019, we can have 24 TB of memory. This is per host, not for the cluster itself. If you multiply 48 TB into 64, that is the maximum memory what a particular cluster will support. If I have created a particular cluster using 64 nodes, imagine this is 64. Let me write it properly. If it is 64 nodes for this particular cluster, which is Hyper-V cluster 1, which is Hyper-V. Imagine if each server will support 512 logical CPUs, and it can support 48 terabyte of memory. You can simply multiply with the number of nodes in a particular cluster, which is 512 logical processor into 64 and 64 into 48 terabyte of RAM. This is how Microsoft Azure will be creating their backend infrastructure to place any virtual machine. Once you create 64 nodes in a cluster, you will be able to provision 8,000 VMs inside this cluster. So 8,000 virtual machines you can place inside this cluster. If you notice, while I was putting the server in a particular rack, did anything strike to your mind? When I am placing this particular server inside this rack, something should have striken to your mind. This is basically how the availability set is created. So you have a server in one of the rack, which is rack 0, and this is rack 1, and this is rack 3. If I place this server in rack 0 and this server in rack 1 and this server in rack 3, this is how the availability sets are created with update domain and fault domain. So now you have 64 nodes in a particular cluster. Again, you go on creating the cluster with 64 nodes and create one more cluster. Once you multiply the number of clusters, that means you will be able to add that much of virtual machines onto each clusters. So when you create a virtual machine on Azure portal, each virtual machines, whatever you are going to create, that will be sitting in one particular cluster and inside one server in a particular availability set. So your virtual machine is going to sit in one of the clusters in one of the rack and one of the availability set. This is how virtual machines will be placed when you create a virtual machine in the Azure portal or the CLI. So we have been working and configuring for single data center. In this section, this is a single data center. If I wanted to have high availability and also DR, in that particular case, I need to have multiple data centers. So this is one of the data center and this is another data center. This is another data center. So I have 3 data centers for high availability and DR. If I place this particular server to create cluster of 64 nodes, if I am placing this server and creating 64 node cluster like this, imagine I am having each server in one rack and I am placing this server in one of the rack. If I create a cluster, assuming this is 64 nodes, and this, if I name cluster 0, and similar way, I have another cluster which is cluster 1. This is cluster 3. Let me name this as cluster 2 because I have named cluster 0. And if I name this as cluster 1, this has 64 nodes and this has 64 nodes. Something should have striken to your mind already. If I call this as a region in Azure terms, and if I name this data center as AZ1 and AZ2 and this is AZ3. Now something have striken to your mind, right? Yes, this is how the availability zone will be created. So whenever you are placing a particular server in different data center to form a cluster, once you create a virtual machine here and you choose availability zone option, each virtual machine, whatever you are going to create, These virtual machines will be created in different availability zones. So you have selected 3 availability zone for your virtual machines, and 3 of the virtual machines will be created in different availability zone. One, it will be in AZ1, and the another will be in availability zone 2. The other one will be availability zone 3. Once you create the virtual machine, the temporary disk, whatever you get, that is directly from the host itself. This particular server has disk. From that disk, you will get the temporary storage. And for the data drive, whatever you have selected, the size of the data disk, what you have selected, that will come from the storage. This particular storage, from each availability zone, you will get the storage. Now you will say, okay, for this virtual machine, it will get the storage from here. For this virtual machine, you will get the storage from here. Now you will say, okay, this is LRS, locally redundant storage. What if I wanted to have IE availability, which is ZRS? For virtual machine, you can have 2 types of managed disk. One is locally redundant storage and the other one is zone redundant storage. Then you will not get this disk from the LRS. What you will get is basically from the zone redundant storage, you will get the disk from here, and for this virtual machine, you will get the disk from here, and for this virtual machine, you will get the disk from here. Even if one of the zone fails, this particular ZRS will take care, because this storage itself is a zone redundant storage. This is how you will get the virtual machine disks for temporary and also the managed disks. And for the virtual network, whatever you are creating, this is the physical network and physical storage. For the network, you will create a software defined network. Basically, it is a virtualized network what you are going to create for the virtual network. And this particular virtual network, whatever you are going to create, that will communicate to this network. This will communicate with this network, and this virtual machine will create. This virtual machine will connect to this virtual network, and there will be a global network where all the networks, which is the physical network, will come and connect. Hope this gave the clarity for building your own cloud and how the cloud is built in Azure data centers. Thank you for watching the video. If you like the content, please subscribe and share. Thank you. Take care.